In this lesson, we're going to look at how to create a crystal material. And we're going to look at some of the nodes and properties that can really make this thing pop in a scene. So let's get started. So first up, we need to make sure that there's nothing else connected to our material. Double click here, and you can just strip it down if you need to, or just import your own object. We built our last material in ice, and we built it from scratch, and it actually came out kind of nice. But you can also choose some of the physical materials that are already present within Unreal 4. One of them is ice. You can actually select it and call that guy up, and when you have him up, all it does is actually turn on a few switches that cater to that physical material in real time to look like ice. It isn't necessarily a whole lot, but it can maybe speed things up a little bit. And in this case, we're going to speed things up just a little bit here. So you'll notice it really didn't hook up anything else. It just kind of set it in motion. So what we'll do now is grab some textures that we need for our scene. And we're going to walk through some of this in just a second, but we're going to pull in our textures first and foremost in here. I'll pull in my color ice. Next to that, we have crystal tessellation. I'll bring him in here. And then we'll, lastly but not least, grab this guy, Ice Grunge. Now, these two guys I procedurally made in Maya using the substance node, and they're completely tileable. This guy's not quite as tileable. I'm not too worried about that because he's just going to be give us a general color sense for the crystal. So let's look at the material properties real quick here. We have surface, we have it translucent. You got to make sure you have that on. And I also turn on subsurface. That allows us to play with anything after the fact if you want to. Like even build in that node system we created for our ice material. Make sure that it's two-sided. That way it'll represent really nicely, especially if you have translucency on. You turn that off and things will look a little distorted and not quite right. Tangent space normals, you want to set that in place. Move down a little bit. And we also want to, by default, turn on enable separate translucency. And this allows things to look pretty well, but you may have a little bit of trouble when it comes to the depth of field. So just keep that in mind. You can turn this guy off and on, but we won't get too much in depth with that. This isn't really what we're going for right now. So we have translucency self-shadowing on. We have it pretty set low to 1 and 2. And these work pretty well, but as you increase them, keep in mind that the translucency, the light that it likes to use, is really the directional light. If you use the point light or spotlight, some of the pixelation as you mess with your translucency will come through, and they won't actually look as good. So if you mess with some of these shadowing as well as your density and opacity, you just got to be careful with that. All right. We're going to scroll down just a little bit here. We also have our back scattering exponent set to 30. This actually works pretty well, and this allows the light to pass through the object. Now, Unreal 4 really tries its best to imitate light passing through surfaces. Now, it's not as robust and is not as strong as if you did this in Maya, Softimage, or 3D Studio Max. This is more real time. So there are some dependencies. If you boast and if you boost everything up really high, you can run into trouble and things can chug, things can get slow. Just keep that in mind. We do want it to work with static lighting in this case. And if we wanted to, we can also set it up to fluid effects, but I'm not really looking for this guy to be too fancy and ridiculous. And I think last but not least, I think everything else should be okay. I have tessellation on in this case, and we're going to play with that in just a second. And we can, if we wanted to, make it enable free of cracks. Here it says enable crack free displacement. And this kind of cleans things up a little bit so it doesn't look so weird or just jaunted here in our scene. And I can turn that on. That's fine. All right, so let's go ahead and add some stuff in here. One, we want to bring in some constants. And we're going to bring in 3 of them. So Control C, Control V, Control C, Control V. Put those in there. And we're going to set these guys, and we're going to place 1 into our specular, 1 into our roughness, and 1 into our emissive color. The emissive color will wait towards the end here. So this first one, we're going to set him to 1.5. We can even set it to 6 if we wanted to, or 1.6. And we're going to plug him into our specular. This guy here is going to go into our roughness, and he can be like, I don't know, 0.6. That works just dandy. And yes, I did say dandy. We're going to move this up here, and then finally we get this guy here, and we're going to make this guy our emissive color. And we're going to grab him, And we're going to set him to, let's do 13. I think it'll work just fine. And he's going to sit things out for a little bit. So let's go and put our color in here initially. Now you notice when we do that, this really doesn't look that great. It looks pretty weak. Let's go and pull this down a little bit. And we definitely can have it look better. Now it's trying to get the translucency to work, but it just looks boring. So if we update this, you'll see your material update in our scene. And you'll notice it just kind of looks a little static. It kind of looks like it's semi-transparent, obviously because it's trying to do the translucency, but it's pretty much looks like most of the other ice stuff we have in here. Nothing to write home about. So what we need to do now is we need to get our refraction set in. So let's go and swap these guys out. Put him up and put him down. Keep things a little more organized. And for my refraction, I'm going to bring this guy in and pull this into refraction right there. And this will give us a nice kind of displaced type of look where it looks like as you turn the camera, it'll start to reflect different positions on our object using the translucency. So this refraction is going to try to work with your translucency as best it can. Now again, you can pull in some coordinates if you need to make these details a little bit more wide, and that'll actually allow you to plug into the X and the Y to move things around. All right, so next in here, we're going to plug this guy into our normal, and this will give us kind of a fractured look into our crystal itself. It'll look like it's chipped and broken. You'll see a little bit there. And you'll notice it's still not quite there yet. So what we need to do is play with this a little bit. Now, one thing that's is bugging me, and you look at this, we go straight from our texture sample into our base color. Kind of boring. So what we need to do is get this crystal to grab some of the color in the environment. And you can fake it because by default, the crystal doesn't really do it super good. So we're going to give it a boost. So we're actually going to click on here. I'm going to type in scene color. I'm going to pull him up. We don't want to plug him in immediately because we need to change his state. Right now it's just coordinates, and you're going to get an error. But we want this to offset the fraction. So what this does, and you can actually play with this a little bit, what this does, it looks at our scene color, and it boosts it using the coordinates on our texture, and makes it so that it kind of bounces around on this object itself. So let's go and pull this in here, and then we're going to pull this into our base color here. And you'll notice we get almost like it's semi-transparent kind of look, right? And it gets that weird type of color effect going on. But it's still not quite there because we need to play with this a little bit more. And one way we can play with it is grab our two constant nodes here and drag them up above here. And keep it a little more organized. And we're going to plug in our emissive color into this slot. And you'll notice now as you look at it, it's really starting to come together. It looks like it's getting there. So we need to add a few more things. So one of them being, we're going to grab our blue channel. I'm going to drag him down and plug him into my subsurface color. And this allows it as the light passes through for it to change color a little bit. And then also I'm going to grab here two slots, or twice I should say, the color area for the texture sample, and put one in the world displacement and one into the tessellation multiplier. And that'll give us a little bit more noise to our crystal. All right, so that's about it with this guy. Let's go and apply it and see what we get. Materials are compiling. We'll let that guy compile. There he goes. Let's move this down. And you can now see we got some pretty cool effects from our crystal and a little bit of glow that allows for a complementary scene. And as you move closer, you can see the light bounce through it. It comes out pretty nice. Not too bad. That's about it with this one. And in the next scene, we'll look at creating a cool kind of magical hologram effect, as well as playing with some of our other materials.